You all are sounding very wonderful today. And Christine and I occasionally trade back and forth who's choosing what song, so this worked very well. Thank you. Living love. What does it mean to live love? What does it mean to be the love that is ultimately all that is? The unfolding quantum field that is known as Akash in Sanskrit, that is known as all kinds of other names in all kinds of other places, has one function, one systemic purpose, one way of being, and that is becoming more interconnected, intersupportive, fulfilling that which is begun. Fulfilling that which is begun. Interconnected. In my early graduate work in the world of systems and cybernetics, the idea that everything that exists is one whole system, and a system is interconnected elements working together to fulfill a function, became my guiding principle. And over the next decade or so, I discovered there was a way of thinking about the world that was called a church that was saying the same thing. You know, if we look at the word Unitarian, we're saying we are not Trinitarian, that there are not three bodies, there is one. And we are saying Universalist, it is all that is. The one bodiness, the one embodiment, the one field unfolding is one. And in the world that is called unity, we are not separated from that one. And really, any logical consideration of Unitarian and universal says the same thing, doesn't it? We cannot be separate from the source or from each other. But we grew up in a culture, and many of you have heard this too many times, but you get to hear it again. We grew up in a culture that was about fear and control to keep power in the hands of a few. And we have witnessed over the last 5 to 10 years an incredible increase in that tendency to push us into isolation, fear, and domination as subjects. Even on some of the more, quote, liberal, some of the more rational, some of the less emotion-based media, when the consumers are doing a good job, we're told that. We are consumers, not citizens. We are not considered by the power structure of this culture to have any power. And yet, for the 6,000 years that this culture has been on the planet, and remember I said 40,000 years people were on this continent, for only 6,000 years have people been subject to someone in control outside of them. Nowhere else, no other time has that been the case. It's not human nature. Human nature is the same nature as the source, the one, the quantum essence, the Akash, the Brahman, of which we are a part. How could it be otherwise? We are it. Therefore, what it is, we are and must be capable of and experiencing. But we've been trained to think otherwise. And because of the way that this universe unfolds, the thoughts and feelings of consciousness become the experience of the one having the thoughts and feelings. So every time that we buy into the idea that control is normal, or that fear and competition is human nature, we are buying into that cultural idea, and it is not real. Nothing in anthropology, nothing in paleontology, nothing in anthropoforensics suggests that that is real. Only the cultural training of an empire that shows up in various forms over the history of the past 6,000 years. So what can we do about it? This is, in one long tradition, the season of nonviolence, which happens between Martin Luther King's birthday in January and Mohandas Gandhi's death day in March, 90 days. And they both said, I can do something. It's also a 6-month anniversary, if you will, of the passing of a Bulgarian woman who went to India as a nun, was put in a school setting and said, I am not a teacher. I don't do this well, and I am falling apart. And she went on retreat in a home that was offered her in Calcutta, and saw a lot of bodies on the street, homeless and familyless and sick and dying. Teresa. Not an Indian woman, a Bulgarian woman, who chose to say, we don't have to put up with this. We can love instead. And so because she was in someone else's home, she didn't bring them home with her, but she was able to help a few people on the street. And what she chose to do was to see each of those bodies, in whatever condition they were, as the embodiment of the person to whom she was married, the Christ. Because when you become a nun, you go through a wedding ceremony, and you are actually marrying the embodiment of the divine in that tradition, a man that we call Jesus Christ. And it's not the masculine-feminine relationship, it's the soul-spirit relationship that is celebrated there. And so that was what she chose to do, was to treat every person she met as her beloved. Wow. And when Mohandas Gandhi, who was raised by a railroad executive in the British Raj in India and sent off to London for his schooling and became a British barrister and was hired by Indians in South Africa to come and resolve some legal issues, and was thrown off a train because his skin was a little too dark. He made a choice. As a barrister trained in London, he was trained to think in terms of the opponents, right? Adversaries. We are fighting each other. We are trying to make them correct. But as a darker skinned person in South Africa in the 19 teens, he made a choice to love everybody he met as the same beingness, regardless of the appearance of difference. And he developed a practice that he invented a term for, satyagraha. Sat is the essential truth, the essential beingness, the fullness of reality. And graha is firmness, firmness in the fullness of reality, in the unity of all. in the oneness, in the one field of being that is all that is. And he trained a few hundred people in South Africa to attempt to do the same thing. And some of them were able to. And it got spread around the world by a British and then an American, a British Episcopal priest, Anglican priest, and an American reporter. And they called it nonviolence, a bad translation. When I was growing up, some of you know, my mother was born in India, my grandmother worked in India, she worked with Gandhi in India, and then came back here and was a spokesman for him, spokesperson. I'm not politically correct. And they would talk about these men and women in India who would, when they were walking down the street, have a broom in front of them to sweep aside any insects so they would be sure not to do any harm. Who would wear a cloth over their face whenever they were outside so they'd be sure not to accidentally inhale a living being. They were called Jains, Jain, and they were practicing something called ahimsa. Ahimsa, do no harm, harmlessness. How can I be in the world in such a way that nothing that I do harms anyone? When I was in Germany in December, I was doing a book tour and getting to see some of the Weihnachtsmarkt, the Holy Night markets. And there was a craftswoman in one of those markets in Mannheim. She was on the edge and she had a mannequin right outside their little wooden chalets that they build. And it just drew me. And there was something on it, very like what I'm wearing today. And she said, and the most wonderful thing about it is ahimsa silk. I bought it. This isn't that one, but this also is ahimsa silk. Silk that has been manufactured by not harming silkworms. I mean, that's carrying it a bit, yes? Right? My goodness, thousands of years people have been harming silkworms. And then in the last 50 years, someone figured out a way that we could be in relation with silkworms such that they are nurtured and we get to enjoy the product of their beingness. Wow. There's a new movement going on in the world today called regenerist, right? Regenerating the soil, regenerating all kinds of things. And in every case, whatever the techniques are, and there are myriad techniques. You can go on YouTube and you can look at all kinds of things, regenerating the water supply, regenerating the life in the soil, regenerating the nutrients in the soil, whatever, it's just all over the place. It's marvelous, really beautiful stuff. And what's common across all of them is that wherever they started from, within a matter of months and sometimes years, there's a deep appreciation and respect that amounts to love for this piece of ground that people have been regenerating. Wow. Sometimes people start out of fear, sometimes they start out of, this shouldn't be that way, it should be this other way. Right? But by the end of having done the process for a while, there is this whole different kind of relationship. And that's the relationship with this land that those who lived here before the Europeans came, the Caucasians came, held. How can we be in this wonderful, symbiotic, mutually supportive, no harm done experience? When I was up in British Columbia a few years back, I got to spend some time with some local native elders, and we were making cedar baskets. We went through the forest, and there were various trees, and there was, we would look, and the tree that was glowing was the tree that we were going to use today. And we would pray and bless this tree and say thank you. And then very, very carefully, we'd cut a little groove on each side of about a 4-inch strip, and then lift that strip up gently and gently. And that was it. We would not gird the tree. We were only taking a little bit of what this tree could regenerate in order to make these baskets. Wow. Such appreciation and respect becomes what we call love. Yeah. Normally on Valentine's Day in my Unitarian congregations, I'll start talking about the qualities of love. We respect each other, we appreciate each other, we honor each other. Can we do that for other than our close family? Can we even do it with our close family? I mean, really. In the wedding vow, to love, honor, and respect. Wait a minute, what is this love stuff? Can we bring that commitment to be that, regardless of the circumstances, to every situation? Can we treat every being as the essence of all that is right here? Can we realize that regardless of the appearance of differences, well, diversity helps keep a system alive, but quite apart from that, regardless of the appearance of differences, we are one and the same stuff. Because the stuff is everywhere. One of the little songs on the music I like to listen to off of a website called Empower Music and Arts. Empower Music and Arts, empowerma.com. It's all the atoms everywhere circulate so we can share, right? And then it goes through a number of things, Dinosaur and dinosaurs, a part of me and part of you. Mm-hmm. I have to say this is interesting. Did you know that Dinosaur was African American?
What?
She passed for one.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
In a time when to have dark skin in this country meant you were shunted away. She didn't have the dark skin, so she could get away with it. But she was raised in an African American community, and that's where she started, in African American churches, to sing. Amazing, isn't it? Aren't we? We love based on what? Generally, we're attracted to those who appear to be similar or who could offer us something. Ram Dass says, in our culture, we think of love as a relational thing. I love you. You are my lover. But while the ego is built around relationship, the soul is not. It wants only to be loved. Its true joy is, for example, to turn someone whom you didn't initially like into the beloved. He said, one way I practice doing so is by placing a photograph of a politician with whom I intensely disagree on my puja table, my altar. Each morning when I wake up, I say good morning to the Buddha, to the Guru, and all the other beings there. But I find it's with a different spirit that I say, hello, Mr. Politician. I know it sounds like a funny thing to do, but it reminds me of how far I have to go to see the beloved in everyone. Me too. He says, the way I work at seeing others, like the politician, as the beloved, is to remind myself, this is another soul just like me who has taken a complicated incarnation, just as I have. I don't want to be in this incarnation any more than he wants to be in his. Ooh. There's a woman on YouTube who uses dowsing rods to connect with her spirit guides, and her great joy is to find what people's soul contracts are. And she's there and she's going, all right, so is Donald Trump an advanced soul to click on an awful incarnation to help us? And the dowsing rods go, yes. Oh my goodness. I have no idea whether there's any accuracy in that statement or not, but that's one of the things that she does. And it's one of the things that Ram Dass was encouraging us to do in his later years. He's an amazing being, yeah. There's a guy named Michael Singer, many of you read Untethered Soul, he's an amazing being. He says, we hear of a kind of love which is unlimited, unconditional, that is at the heart of many spiritual teachings. We're told that we should, toxic word that, we should love everyone, including our enemies. And we find this idea extremely challenging, he says, because it seems so contrary to what we experience as love, to how we have come to understand and express love. Because it challenges the limitations we have put on that idea we call love. The limitations we have put on it. He says, if we think of love merely as a form of affection or the desire to be close to someone, then naturally we find it impossible to imagine feeling love for someone who is so antagonistic or hateful or immoral. How could we ever love such a person? He says the love that we're talking about here has nothing at all to do with the physical situation. It goes far beyond that. He says, love, in my experience, is essentially the recognition of our connection to one another, to all living beings, and to life itself. He says, I would say that it's a recognition of that intimate, intrinsic, underlying connection that we all share. It's essentially seeing ourselves in the other whenever we look at them. And it can be ourself in the egoic, mistaken, always confused, often fearful self, or it can be our highest self, the Atman, that is Brahman embodied in us and through us. That is the higher self, the beingness, the consciousness, the true self, and in Christian terms, the Christ self, the Buddha nature. I can see that in anyone, if I allow it. If I can remember that we are in one Unitarian, universalist beingness, all beings. Yes. And that is the meaning of the word Namaste. Namaste. Thank you.